Welcome to our live stream today from Birken Forest Monastery. My name is Ajahn Sona, and we are going to answer some questions today. And feel free to submit questions in the chat bar on the side. And we will mix in live questions and questions that we failed to answer a few weeks ago. And there'll be a lively mix of both. And so let us begin, Metta.
Yes, Ajahn. The first question is from Moria from Ukiah, California, United States. What is the best approach to conceit when it comes up?
Well, conceit, you want an approach to it, but probably you want to get over it is what you want. You don't want to just approach it. So, feeling its burden, so that the conceit means that you have to be somebody, and the burden of having to be a person. Conceit is, if you were the last person on earth, you wouldn't have any conceit, would you? There's nobody to compare and contrast with. So conceit has something to do with I'm better than you, I'm worse than you, I'm equal to you. And interestingly, there is a statement by the Buddha so that he says, the Arahant, the fully enlightened person, does not think, I am better than you, I am less than you, and they don't think I am equal to you either. They're all comparisons. They don't think about themselves compared to you. And there's no more comparison than there is a spruce tree to an oak tree. They're just different trees. We can't be anybody else. And nobody else can be us, so we are just what we are. And this comparison mind is the nature of conceit. Strong sense of self. And then we also, when we reflect on where our body came from, we don't know where our body came from. We did not make our body. So all that we are physically, we can't explain. We are property of Mother Nature. Biology just produces a body, and we have no idea how the cells replicate, how the bones grow, the genetic history. All of these things are completely nothing to do with one's, quote, self. And then we have a mind, we have emotions, and who can explain those? So we are not owners of our body, our mind. We don't create it. We don't own it. So conceit has something to do with a sense of, look at me, how amazing that I grew long, straight red hair. Who grew long, straight red hair? Or curly black hair, who grew that? How do you do that? It's nothing to do with you. It's just some sort of natural process. So we get rid of this burden of having to be somebody that claims to have invented a body and a mind. We can dispense with that and just see that what nature is, and we can then go back to the main point of Dhamma, which is the reduction of suffering. So the reduction of conceit is a way of reducing suffering, because we do suffer by comparisons, and even if we're at the top of the class, then we have to stay at the top of the class, on and on and on. So there are many downsides to the conceit, and there's lightness of being when we free ourselves from that. So that we just feel a burden, and that helps us to get away from it. And then we can do a little exercises of not boasting or not trying to be the winner. And also the opposite, not being concerned with whether we're the loser. Lots of people have very low self-esteem. And the idea of self-esteem is the word esteem is as a form of estimate. We are estimating ourselves. And we need to stop estimating ourselves. If you have any emotion towards yourself or others, it's just goodwill. You don't have to live up to anything. You don't have to be the best. You don't get any more points for being the best than you do for being the worst. You just get goodwill without needing to merit it. You just have goodwill for this mysterious being that happens to be human at this time. So we see that there are ways to practice this, getting away from having to be the best, having to be equal, or thinking we're the worst, or any of this ranking stuff. This pursuit of self-esteem, positive self-esteem, is a dangerous thing, and it's highly encouraged in sort of normative psychology, trying to improve people's self-esteem. But there's always danger associated with that, because if you need a reason for positive self-estimate, then if you can't live up to that reason, then you're going to plunge into low self-esteem, aren't you? So it's better to free yourself from the need for esteem and go straight to just goodwill. And goodwill, if you really have goodwill, you will take care of yourself and take care of others without any other motive than it feels good. Some people say, well, if I need to correct myself to perfect myself, and this, if I don't notice my faults and so forth, I won't do anything about it. But that's not a problem. You do accept yourself, including all the faults, but it doesn't mean that you do nothing about the faults. Simple as that. People make a very false reasoning about this, that somehow I love you just the way you are means that you're going to do nothing about your problems or faults. No, why would you say that? You can have goodwill. If you get a dog off the street or something like that, and it's got mange and so forth, you have goodwill for this dog, but it doesn't mean you're not going to fix the mange. You're going to improve the mange, house train the dog, teach him not to bark at night, things like this, of course. There's no conflict between these two things. But feel the lightness, the lessening of suffering when you have the right attitude towards yourself and others. So this is the idea of overcoming conceit. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next question, Metta.
Yes, Ajahn. The next question is from the live chat from JCKM01's channel. I really enjoy popular culture such as pop music and musical theater. But having recently done a 1-week retreat, I have a view that spending time and energy on these is a waste of time as far as Buddhism is concerned. However, I have also had a challenging week feeling emotional overwhelm, perhaps due to childhood complex trauma, so have spent much time listening to music, watching TV, and not wanted to meditate. This seems to have helped to calm my nervous system. But I feel like I am losing faith in Buddhism being the right guide to living the lay life due to my enjoyment of popular culture and how this can calm my dysregulation. Conflicting it seems with the teachings of the Buddha, which is causing doubts on whether Buddhism is right for me or not. Ajahn, any advice please on firstly the dilemma between enjoying popular culture versus Buddhism, and secondly, any advice around faith when one is struggling with overwhelm and complex trauma?
I'm sure that a number of people who have been to meditation retreats and experienced what it's like to be in a low sensory environment, just watching the mind, and then going back to the world can associate with, can relate to your experience. I think everybody who's done a 1-week retreat would have similar questions for themselves. First of all, the idea of the 1-week retreat or the 10-day retreat is really a modern notion for lay people. At the time of the Buddha, people lived in the household life. They would visit the monastery. The Buddha advised if there's a monastery near you and you can, visit perhaps once every 2 weeks, the new moon and full moon. There's nothing all that important about the new moon or full moon. It's just that was the clock of the time. They were on a lunar calendar. So to hear Dhamma and associate with the monks and get refreshed about establishing your virtue and attitude to the world. But the Buddha didn't really expect householders to have the time to go off for a week or 10 days or more and just stay in a monastery. They didn't design monasteries for lay people to stay in. So this retreat and systematic meditation training for lay people is a fairly new thing. It has occurred in various times in history, and then it's gone out of favor at other times. Of course, I give retreats for lay people, and this monastery is designed both as a monastery and a retreat center. So I think that it's quite transformative for lay people to do this, and perhaps in modern times people do have holidays and time off, and you see many, many thousands of people, I guess millions of people around the world have attended these week-long or 10-day retreats. And, you know, it does create, it can create a conflict between life as an ordinary person in the world and this entertainment and so forth. So why do we like entertainment? Why do we listen to music? It is to distract ourselves from troubling issues. We don't have to think about the meaning of life and the fact that we all die in the end, and everybody dies, and is there any meaning? All these philosophical questions are removed while you're immersed in music. Some people, music is not enough. They need drugs or alcohol, constant distraction, because the mind is ill at ease when not distracted. And we're talking about early childhood trauma and so forth. Lots of people are traumatized as well, so they feel very uncomfortable when they're face to face with the mind. The uneasiness and anxiety of that, whether it's conscious or unconscious, just is experienced throughout your mind and body. So determine that you are going to face your mind and learn to manage the uncomfortable feeling of unresolved trauma or anxieties resulting from that. Or you're going to distract yourself and get the immediate and easy comfort of music and entertainment. But sometimes the music and entertainment thing runs out on you. It no longer is magical enough to suppress the issue of existence. And that's the uncomfortable feeling that you're more or less distracting yourself or wasting your life when the primary issue of what's the point of my existence anyway has not been addressed. So there's an uncomfortable tension in all of this. So this is where the rubber meets the road. And some people do indeed say, well, I don't want to meditate. It's hard and it makes me uncomfortable. I don't want to answer the question, what's the point anyway? I just want a moment of relief. So and that's why people take drugs as relief. They fiddle around, they play sports and games and socialize and endless distractions because the mind is uncomfortable without those things. Lots of people would say, that's the healthy life, that the life of playing games and music and entertainment and all of these things is social drinking and laughing and so forth is the healthy life, and this idea of meditation is somewhat aberrant. It's not good use of a human's time. But if you can train the mind and go through the uncomfortable parts and get support from the Sangha, a group of friends who practice, or teachers, or even this, like live streams like this, encouraging you to learn the art of the contemplative life, then it's a higher experience. But you can't know this until you do discover a higher experience. So it's a matter of faith. So you're questioning whether you should spend your time doing this. This is an interesting area called right view. And if you don't have a view that beyond this life, so if your view is very fixed that I have one life, this is it, then everything goes blank. And then if you firmly have that view, then you might think, well, it's best to just amuse myself. Because if I give up amusing myself and face the uncomfortable experience of meditation sometimes and have to learn this new art of being, and I might never get satisfaction out of it, and then I die. And then I would have spent a lot of time struggling with this, and I could have easily sort of just distracted myself. So this is one of the reasons why the wrong view demotivates you for higher aspirations. So right view entails the notion of another continuing on existence, and that it's worth putting in causes, uplifting causes in this life, which will have results in the future. So this is the idea of delaying gratification for higher things. So this is a very important question that we're dealing with here. And you see this in all aspects of life. Some people don't go to university, or they don't get technical training, and because immediate gratification, they'd rather be fooling around or drinking in a park someplace than having to read about Greek philosophy. And so you end up without skills. You get immediate gratification, but you don't have a higher understanding of life and culture around you. So you choose the immediate reward versus the longer reward. You choose not to delay gratification for higher things, and this is this results in a lower form of quality of life. The ability to delay gratification and undergo disciplines for future rewards is how higher experiences are attained. And nobody can make you do it. Everybody has to make the choice. Do I take the one candy now, or wait for the 10 candies at the end of the week? So this is Dhamma, or Buddhism, and it's delay of gratification on steroids. So it's all about ultimate aims beyond this very life, in fact. Okay, on to the next question.
The next question is also from the live chat from Rafael Di Donato. Can you say a little bit about the overlap and differences between Buddhist and psychoanalytic theories of consciousness and what those implications mean?
Well, of course, I'm from the Western culture, and I'm familiar with all of the history of psychology. And I did do a video called Buddhist Psychology versus Modern Psychology. Modern Psychology, I believe it was. Two videos on that, just looking at the history of psychology, because psychology, the Western psychology is a modern thing. I would say that the Greek philosophers developed psychology, and psychology as separate from religion. So what happened was that the Greek philosophers were examining the nature of the human mind and various things about consciousness. And then somehow that culture declined, and eventually the Western world became Christian. And for 1,500 years or more, Christianity and its outlooks dominated how a person should think and feel and the attitudes. And then sometime in the 17th century or 17th century or 18th century, people began to reflect outside of the idea of God and religious ideas. What can we say about humans and their minds? And this is what we call psychology. We had to coin the word, psyche, the study of the psyche, and we had to use the Greek word psyche. So you finally get a university department of psychology at Harvard in the 1880s. So this is how recent it is. You're really talking about some sort of middle of the 19th century before you have really scientific study. And then you have people like Freud and Jung, who are psychiatrists. Remember, this psychoanalysis starts with psychiatrists, and they're dealing with people who have extreme neurosis or significant mental illnesses, and they're developing their theories by working with these patients. And then they explore the motivations, the inner workings of the mind. And you have all these schools of psychotherapy. There isn't such a thing as psychotherapy. There's just like, whose theory are you talking about? And every 10 years, somebody comes up with a new theory. Freud, for instance, was hugely dominant, but he's out of favor now. And I spent a good deal of time researching both Freud and Jung, just understanding what their motivations were, where their influences were, and how wrong they were in some ways, especially Freud, just radically wrong in many ways. And this is affecting all kinds of people. So Buddhism is also a psychotherapy, because it's very oriented towards personal effort and understanding. So it's more or less it's the original psychotherapy, and it is fully immersive. There aren't any. You see your psychotherapist once a week or something and function normally in society. They hope, perhaps it's normative. They're hoping to unburden you of some of your distress. But Buddhism is how many people live the life of a monk. So it's a radical form of full immersion psychotherapy, where you do nothing else. You are stepping outside of the normal demands of work and family, and doing nothing else but exploring the possibilities of the mind. So it's a deep, very deep and insightful practice. And the Buddha himself is claiming to have personally achieved success in the overcoming of all suffering and the development of what are called the faculties of enlightenment. In brief, the 7 factors of the enlightened mind are a very heightened capacity for attention, investigation of reality, energy, joy, serenity, deep focus and stillness of the mind, and a mature emotional balance in all circumstances of life. And he personally claims to have achieved that, and he says that many of his students who gather around him as monastics and as lay people also have achieved significant levels of this. Now, oppose that to, say, people like Freud, who has never even remotely claimed anything like that. And he also said that his systems weren't for all that he claimed was that turning your extreme neurosis into ordinary human misery. People, they're dealing, the psychotherapists of the 19th century and early 20th century are dealing with people who are can't function, who are extreme suffering, and they're trying to get them functional. And so that's kind of the context of that. But Buddhism is not like that. They're aiming for super normal purification of the mind. And they have the techniques, and they have not just tens or hundreds of people who have achieved this, but millions over time. And it's lasted for 2,500 years because it works. And so is a huge gulf and difference in the idea of psychotherapy, modern Western psychotherapy, and Buddhist ideas of the mind and what we call enlightenment. Yes. So that's in brief. I really could talk a long time about this, but I won't. Yeah.
So sticking with the live chat, we have a number of questions on jhana. So let's go to this question from Yes. What degree of importance do you place on jhana practice, and what so-called depth do you think is accurate? The Buddhists seem to define right samadhi as jhana, Ayya Khema or Pa-Auk, for example.
Yeah. Now, I want to unravel some of these terms for the audience, because we have all kinds of people watching this live stream, and some of them are familiar with these terms and some of them are not. So jhana is a word. It's JHANA. And you may have, let me just say interestingly that as Buddhism went to it, so the core language of Buddhism is Pali. It's a northern Indian sort of folk language, actually, similar to Sanskrit, but it's more used widely in the population. Anyway, that's the word of the Buddha is sort of embedded in this language called Pali. Eventually, Buddhism is an international religion, and it doesn't care about what country, culture, race, or anything like this. So it spread easily into the rest of Asia. When I went to China, the Chinese language is different, and they use this word. They would pronounce this word jhana as Chan. So what we have in China, Chan Buddhism, which is the cultivation of strong meditation, meditation monks. Not all monks are meditation monks, by the way. So some are scholar monks, or ritualist monks, or social activist monks, or things like this. As it went to Japan, they have difficulty with this saying Chan, and that became Zen. So now have you heard Zen Buddhism? Zen Buddhism. So this is the word jhana. When it finally arrives in Japan, it becomes Zen. And so is jhana the eighth factor of the Noble Eightfold Path? It is. And there are 4 jhanas. And this is not just a guessing game. This is very explicitly explained in the suttas as what constitutes the Eightfold Path. There's a great deal of discussion of this throughout history. How important is jhana? How important is the samadhi practice? Especially only in modern times, you find this word vipassana, insight practice, which some schools of it want to bypass the development of samadhi or the jhanas. They want you to get right on with enlightenment itself through insight. But the word vipassana as a practice, or the idea of a vipassana practitioner versus a samadhi practitioner, is actually later commentarial idea. In the early suttas, you see the Buddha advocating samatha vipassana. Think about that as a hyphenated term. Samatha, meaning samadhi, dash vipassana, meaning seeing clearly. That's all it means. There's a lot of mystery around this word vipassana, as if it was a technique in itself. It's not a technique in itself. Well, often people who are so-called practicing vipassana are actually, what they're practicing is mindfulness. Mindfulness is the seventh factor of the Eightfold Path, and you can practice mindfulness. And if you succeed at the practice of mindfulness, samatha, the next factor, samadhi, will result. You get your reward for having succeeded at mindfulness when it spills into the eighth factor of the path, right samadhi. And then samadhi, the Buddha says, there is no need to wish. May wisdom arise. One who has deep samadhi, wisdom naturally rises and flows out of right samadhi. Why do I emphasize right samadhi or right jhana, not just jhana? Because right jhana means that you understand right view. All of the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path have a little prefix in front of them, samma, S-A-M-M-A, and that word means right, in line with the right view of things, the Four Noble Truths. And so developing jhana is always at the service of the arising of the enlightened mind, the wisdom and insight. And so both samatha and vipassana give you correct information about the nature of existence. So deep samadhi concentration in conjunction with clarity of mind and clarity of understanding, clarity of sight. So vipassana means to see very clearly. They are not enemies, they are friends, and they function together, and they produce the factors of enlightenment. So you mentioned two people, Ayya Khema and Pa-Auk Sayadaw. Ayya Khema was an advocate of samadhi, and Pa-Auk Sayadaw, a Burmese monk, is also an advocate of the development of these jhanas before the practice of so-called vipassana. And that took a lot of nerve to do in Burma, because there's a huge, rather modern movement. This is something that began in the 19th century with Ledi Sayadaw and Mahasi Sayadaw and so forth. They were Abhidhamma scholars and influenced by that, and they developed whole systems called vipassana schools. And it became the standard approach in Burma, and a real setting aside of any development of jhanas. So Pa-Auk Sayadaw had to go against the stream to some degree to advocate for the importance of jhana, which is very clear in the Noble Eightfold Path. It's very important. So he's restoring that. So I think it's very impressive and very good, because I think it's a very right approach to things. Ayya Khema was a very interesting woman, Austrian, I think, by birth, German by birth, yeah, something like that. And she encountered Buddhism somewhat late in life, and eventually became a nun sometime in her 50s, I believe. And she went to Sri Lanka and to some degree had to practice on her own, because there are the meditation structures in Sri Lanka, the monastic, there's a small minority of monks that do deep meditation practice. And she had to pursue this somewhat on her own, because she can't join the bhikkhuni order if you're a woman, and the bhikkhuni order was not established at that time in Sri Lanka. So she's working on this on her own, and then she began to be a teacher, and but her versions of these jhanas are somewhat what we would call jhana light. They seem to be very accessible to people and so forth, but the way they're described both in the suttas and especially in the commentaries, they're very supernormal attainments, and they're classified as supernormal attainments. And the commentaries indicate that it's very, very difficult to attain them. And so there's there's just opinions about whether her approach to these things are really deep enough, or really what is meant by the true attainment of these jhanas. I won't indulge in any controversy on that. I would say that it's not great to tell people that it's impossible to attain jhana. Like, who knows? There's all kinds of amazing people out there that can do extraordinary things and very determined. So it may be indeed possible for people to attain jhana in this day and age. But I also would avoid crediting a person with jhana if they don't have it, because it would be a shame to miss out on a supernormal experience, much deeper, beautiful experience, if you credit them with having it and they haven't attained it. That's too bad, because they've missed the experience. It's like talking about a fabulous restaurant, and then somebody goes and eats there, and then they say, well, it was all right, but I don't know. But then they went to the wrong restaurant. There was the Greasy Spoon down the street, but not the Michelin 3-star. So this whole polarity around jhana has to be corrected, I think. And I've been attempting to do that for the last 20 years or more, trying to find the appropriate sense of what was meant by jhana in the time of the Buddha, and how the later commentaries have exaggerated certain things, and then how some modern teachers have downplayed the actual depth of the experience. So I'm trying to find that proper balance for this jhana thing. So anyway, this question allowed me to explain a little more of this, and it seems that today I'm spending quite a bit of time on each question. We got 3 questions now, and okay, let's try question number 4. Yeah.
Yes, Ajahn. The next question is from Upasika Ann from White Salmon, Washington, United States. Since, from your talk on the Four Noble Truths, embodiment in existence ends with Nibbana, it sounds something like nihilism. Does that mean that consciousness or awareness end as well? Or is there a continuation of awareness following Nibbana?
My goodness, we have some questions today, don't we? All of my favorites. I hope I don't go too long on this, but yeah, this is one of the ultimate questions that is endlessly debated. This is where the mind goes blank. So be prepared also to realize that this is a little bit like the search for the unified field theory in physics, how to reconcile quantum physics with macro physics. And Einstein died trying to figure it out and couldn't, and nobody has accomplished this, trying to tie in what happens at the micro level with the way reality appears at the macro level. So there are a lot of things in reality that are hard to answer. For instance, is the universe eternal, or does it begin out of nothing? Is it infinite in space or finite in space? These are hard questions, aren't they? The Buddha actually recommended that one just set those aside. that you probably can't get a satisfactory answer to these things. And of course, the famous question that a number of people ask them, what happens to the fully enlightened person when they die? And the Buddha's answer to this was, what happens to a fire when it goes out? Does it go to the east, the west, the north, or the south? And then that's a mind stopper. Say, you say, well, it doesn't go in a direction, it just goes out. So the Buddha goes back to, like, what are you talking about when you talk about a fully enlightened person dying? What do you mean? What do you mean by a person to begin with? What is a person? Or are you talking about an identity, an unchanging identity that travels through time? That is the soul theory. So that's, by the way, that is the definition. Most religious people who talk about souls, and in India, Atman, have an idea that there's a solid identity, a real you that travels through time, unchanged and untouched by changes and unaffected by death itself, the death of the body, and so forth. So that's a theory, and Christians often, when they're asked about the soul, they have a sense of there's a soul, but when they're pushed on to define what you mean by that, they often fail. And if you look in Christian history, there is a time in Christian history where the Christian scholastics actually said the same thing. A soul must be an indivisible, eternal kind of monad that travels through time, is indestructible. And this is exactly what the Buddha said is not the case. And that the enlightenment is the realization that there is no such thing as a substantial self, a indestructible, like a steel ball bearing that travels through time unaffected by change. Or in some schools, some of the Hindu schools, they talk about it's like a mirror, it reflects things, but itself is not changed by things. Again, the Buddha rejects this idea. There is essentially no self, no permanent self. Everything is flowing and changing. The 5 khandhas are changing, all changing. And this is the Buddha says, I will show you the all. Here is the all. There is a body, there is perception, feelings, consciousness, and volitions. This is the all. There is no self within the all, and there is no self outside. There is no self inside these 5 khandhas, and there is no substantial self outside these khandhas either. At death, the enlightened person's death, the 5 khandhas cease. So that's clear enough. But people are left, well, that's kind of like, that's not a fun ending. Don't I go to Nibbana like forever and ever, and I'm blissed out forever and ever? Well, that is a kind of yearning that the mind has, and it's the Buddha never says such a thing, but he doesn't it's also not mechanical annihilation. So when we talk about, in modern times, when we talk about people die and that's it, simple, you die, boop, done, annihilated. Well, that we would call that mechanical annihilation. That the Buddha was very familiar with this idea. There were philosophers in India at the time that held this idea that when you die, it's it, done. But he said, no, that's not what I'm teaching. Oh, I see. You live forever then. No, that's eternalism. So that's typically Christianity teaches that when you die and go to heaven, you go forever. Unfortunately, when you go to hell, you go forever too. So he avoids these two. He calls them extremes of you. You don't just die and that's it, and you don't just go to heaven forever either. Everything is flow and change, but the processes of existence don't simply cease at death for everybody. The drives, the ignorance, the greed, the hatred, and the delusion drives one on through existences. And until the greed, the hatred, and delusion are uprooted, extinguished completely. So Nibbana means, and Nirvana means the cessation of greed and hatred and delusion. And it's only when they cease that the process of eternally, not eternally, but the going on in the round of samsara can cease. What that entails exactly is quite beyond any kind of talking about, but certainly in the arahant, the enlightened person, experiences this release in their very life. You can talk to them, and the khandhas remain in this life, and the suffering has ceased. The greed, hatred, and delusion has ceased, and they are experiencing the factors of enlightenment, which ranges from joy to deep serenity. And then they don't have a sense of self or any concern about a self ceasing or anything like this. So that is the all that we can say about the matter. But it's definitely, Nibbana is not described as a kind of an alternative heaven where you go. That would just be another version of heaven, right? So, yeah. So I hope that satisfies you. Of course, that doesn't satisfy anybody, but we have to be content with that explanation. Yeah.
Yes, Ajahn. The next question is from the live chat from Aspernaldus from the Netherlands. What does it mean if one thinks they experienced an enlightenment and their view in life has changed to a peaceful one, yet it doesn't feel like the development has fully completed? How to proceed?
Well, that's great. And that is exactly why there are stages of enlightenment, and very carefully defined by the Buddha as 4 stages of enlightenment. The Buddha is just a brilliant psychologist and philosopher, and able to articulate these things and show the stages. It reminds me of the stages of maturity for children. There's a French psychologist, I forget his name. You remember his name? He specialized in childhood development, and Piaget, yes. You get full marks, Metta, for, she's in the background there. She didn't even need Google to come up with Piaget. He talked about like the stages of development of a child. One of them is the idea of preservation of quantities and so forth. When a child is like 4 or 5, you can take 5 or 6 checkers and put them on a board, and if you put them close together and count them with the child, and ask them, how many there are, then you separate them. You put them in farther away from each other, and then ask how many there are, and then which one has more. And they'll often say the one that has more space between them has more. And they don't get the principle of conservation until they're 7 or something like this. So for them, if you pour a glass of Kool-Aid in a tall glass and then pour it into a short, fatter glass, and then pour it back into the taller glass, and then you fill both glasses right to the top, and you ask them, which one do you want? they'll take the taller glass, and then you ask them why. It has more. And they right in front of them, you showed them that they have exactly the same amount, but they can't grasp this principle. So at 7, somehow you start to realize, oh, they have the same. Doesn't matter, the shape is different, but the quantity is the same. So this is kind of enlightenment. It's stages of development and growth. So one has a breakthrough and sees the world differently. But your vision is not so complete and clear that it's there all the time. Under certain conditions, old habits arise. This is when people are trying to get over addictions. So somebody is addicted to alcohol and so forth. They decide to give it up. They go to the rehab and then go to Alcoholics Anonymous, whatever. And some of the advice is like, don't associate with people who are drinking. Don't go into places that remind you, that trigger things. The other trigger is that if you get emotionally upset, you're likely to, your decision to stop drinking, it falls away and you start again. So have somebody you can talk to when you get upset and feel a temptation to drink. You need somebody to get you through that brief period. But you have made a resolution. You do understand the drawbacks of drinking alcohol or taking drugs, all the different types of addictions one can have. So you've begun. You're on your way. You're now a recovering addict. And then, but at some point, so some people have no addictive tendencies. You know, they've tasted alcohol, they've drunk alcohol, they have no addiction to it at all. They don't crave it, they don't think about it. So that would be that would be a state where you have no interest in it whatsoever. It doesn't do anything for you. So these are stages you see in human conditions, and your ordinary person is addicted to all kinds of things, addicted to the sensory world, and quite often disappointed and dismayed and upset and suffering because of the world is unpredictable, out of control, and takes away stuff that you like sometimes and denies you access to stuff that you want. So you want lots of money, and darn if you just can't get it, you know. You lose your job, and that's frustrating, terrible. And then you get a job, but it's terrible, you know, and you can't find your way out. So the world is a frustrating experience. So we're somewhat like children. We seem not to know that the world is out of our control, that it is unsatisfactory, that things we like disappear, things we don't like appear, and we seem to be surprised by this, that we didn't know that, we're shocked by it, we're distressed by it. This is strange. Then you come across more philosophical teachings and say, oh, this is the way the world is. Don't get attached to this, you know. You go up to the top of the mountain and look down on all of this stuff, and don't fret over this stuff. And you think, that's great advice. Whoa, that's such a relief to encounter that. Give up running the universe. And then you think, yes, of course. Like, I was never running the universe, but I was doing a lot of wishing and wanting and hoping and yelling. But the universe wasn't listening and never will. So okay, I'm going to give up running the universe, and I feel better already. So this is the kind of the process of enlightenment. If you want more detail on this, listen to my talks called the Stages of Enlightenment. It's on the YouTube channel, and I give the details of the stages of enlightenment and how one progresses from one stage to the next, etc. Yeah.
Yes, Ajahn. The next question is from Marco from Brisbane, Australia. Dear Ajahn, I often find that I keep judging people on the street for how they look or what they do automatically, and it is almost impossible to avoid. Can this even be fixed? As a monk, are you free of this mental habit?
Well, this is one of the first advisories that the Buddha gives to monks and this is called restraint of the senses. And it is one of the necessary things one learns, restrain the senses. It doesn't mean to close your eyes, but it means that although you see things, you don't invest in what's called the sign of the fault. So people have faults, and then you focus on the fault, and with that up comes aversion, ill will towards the fault. And so the Buddha says, don't do that. Just see them, but don't focus on the sign of the fault. And if you want real peace, don't focus on the sign of the beautiful either. So we're admiring things and craving things and celebrating things and then despising things and hating things and criticizing things. And we're doing this with an emotion behind it. And the sign of the beautiful is desire. We want it. The sign of the fault rises with ill will. And so these disturb us. So the Buddha says, let there just be whatever is seen. Don't comment on the beautiful or the fault. And this requires training. You train yourself out of this, because this is, of course, the normal thing. People think they're very smart by criticizing everything. Oh, this person is stupid, and that person is ugly, and that person is like badly dressed. Ha ha ha! And you can see, you're so smart. You can see everybody's faults and all this kind of stuff. And then we celebrate this. We're smart, and they're stupid. And actually, you're not smart because you're disturbing yourself. And it's not the case that some people don't dress badly. There are all these faults. But the wise person doesn't waste their time with these things. They can plainly see these things, but you don't invest emotionally in these things. You're detached from this, because you're just endlessly commenting on the universe. The universe just produces this. People are products of the universe. This is the way the universe works. Which planet do you like? Jupiter or Saturn? Which one is the worst one? I love Saturn. It's got those rings and so forth. Jupiter's too big. It's stupider. What's the point of this? Who's suffering here? So you want to free yourself from the suffering, so you can't invest in this. So you got to sit down with yourself and talk it through and say, I could walk through here and not have a problem. Just stop commenting on this, and you feel light and free. Turns out the world isn't my problem anymore. The universe isn't my problem. I give up running the universe. That's it. I'm done. I resign from having to fix everything and comment on everything. So it's just freedom. You aspire to freedom, and then so you can do that. And that's what monks are trained, again and again and again, encouraged and trained. And so you listen to Dhamma talks again and again, because it's very easy to fall into this again and again. But you train yourself. You train yourself out of this. Yeah. Okay, well, we've come to the end of our time here. What did we get through? 5 questions? It's one of those days
7.
where I wanted to spend more time on. They were all good, really good questions. Some of them are on my favorite issues. So we will likely be back next week, and stay tuned for the next live stream. Over and out.